Gene Wolfe, King Rat. Well, honey, I saw the elephants, and that was the start of it. I'd heard about them, only I'd never seen any before, so I hid and watched them swinging along the street. I counted them, too, counting with chunks of cement when I ran out of fingers. 2 10s and 3 was what it was, only after the first 10 there started to be people, too, keeping in their shadows, just one here and one there, and staying down so you knew they didn't want the spiders to see them. Nah, they weren't walking fast at all. They had to step over things all the time and go around them, too, and hold on to the tail of the one in front, you know how they do? And all that slowed them down. It wasn't hard for the people to keep up at all. Well, honey, I should have gone with the last elephant, and I knew it, only I was scared, and it took me a time to get my guts up. Then I ran from one place to the next one, keeping to the shadows as much as I could. That's how you do. I know I've told you before, but that's how you do, and don't you never forget it. It took me a long time to catch up, but I did because they went clear out of the city. That was where we lived then, in the city. There had been buildings and houses for us there once, only the spiders broke it, I don't know why, and smashed everything down flat after. Edwards, he knew the name of it, and he told me one time, only I don't remember it. It never seemed right to me that the city should have a name like it was a woman. Only Edwards, he had known it when he was still alive, see? So what was just the city to me was Minnie, or whatever the name was to Edwards, only she was dead. Well, honey, I'd never been out of the city before, and it scared the shit out of me. I wanted to go back and go back quick, only there were 2 or 3 reasons not to. One was that there was so much to see out there, like great big bushes that grew up on top of big tall posts. You know what a bush is? That's right, like a broom upside down, only green. A bush is alive, too, like grass, only it can't move. Just stay right where it is and grow. I used to cut sticks off them and clean my teeth. Quite a few of us did that. The other one was that the shadows were getting long, you know, honey? Like when lights are turned down and there's only this one light a long ways away. Back then, all of us had just the one light, really. The sun was what everybody called it, and it was way up overhead, way too far for anybody to touch, ever. No, not even if I climbed up on something. It was big and bright, and we couldn't turn it off, or turn it on, either. Back before the spiders, people had made these little lights you could shake. That was the way you fed them. And when you'd shaken them enough, you could turn them on to see things, and turn them off, too, when you didn't want the things to see you. I used to have one, only it broke. Well, honey, the sun wasn't like that, not at all. It turned itself on and it rolled across the dome so the spiders could see into all the dark places and look for us. Only when it got to the other side, it went out, and then it was our turn. We could go all around and they couldn't see us hardly at all, unless we lit cook fires. Which we had to do, you see, when we had something that had to be cooked. Mostly that was one of us. We killed each other and ate the meat a lot more than we do here, because there wasn't as much to eat there. Nowhere near like here. If you went out looking when there was lots of sunshine, that was light from the big light way up, the spiders would get you, probably. Only if you went out looking when it was dark, somebody else would. If you went out by yourself, it was really, really tough, because it could be 5 or 6 of them, sometimes a family, or just friends. I got away from that many 2 or 3 times, but it was never easy. So that was another reason not to go back. I'd be in strange parts after dark, and it was the way lots of people got jumped. Only the main thing was I was hungry. It was going to be poison hard to get something to eat back in the city, and probably I wouldn't. And I figured that there had to be food where the elephants were going, or others wouldn't be following them. I was right, too. Out there past where the city had been, there was a spider boat. It was this one we're on right now, only you can't ever understand how big it was. It was bigger than the whole city, and higher than a dome, and it sparkled everywhere, just like broken glass in the sun. Well, sure, honey. If I'd have thought, I would have known you'd never seen broken glass. Only I've seen a lot of it, and it was the thing I thought of when I saw that spider boat. Ever since then, I've been wondering how it looks at night because it wasn't night yet when I saw it. I bet it looks the way the stars do, only you've never seen them either. There's a place where you can see them. I'll show it to you as soon as I've got the time. Say you and me were out in the grass country, and we went to the river up toward the clean part where there aren't any lizards, not many anyhow. And say you dipped up some water and threw it in the air so the light hit it. On the outside, this spider boat looks like that, only a million times bigger and more sparkly. It seemed like it went up forever and spread out bigger than the city, like I said, and the bottom of it was sunk down into the dirt by the way to the top, so I couldn't really see how big it was. And the elephants went in there, up a big bridge that hadn't been smashed at all, still holding each other's tails. You know how they do. They walked so far through the boat that I was ready to quit, and I saw a lot of stuff that looked good anyway. Some did quit. Yeah, elephants will do anything the spiders tell them to do. They're only animals, honey, but they're not just animals either. The river lizards are just animals, and they don't hear the spiders. Neither do the dogs. Back in the city we had dogs, and they could be bad, but we'd catch them and eat them whenever we could, so there wasn't hardly any left. The grass country dogs are bigger and meaner than ours ever were, and trying to kill them is a real good way to get hurt. I saw one bite right through a spear once. That's right. I went in with the elephants, and so did the other people. We went quite a ways inside the boat, then through a big door into the grass country. It was dark in there, and I'll tell you, I didn't like that one bit. It wasn't because I was scared of the dogs or the lions. I didn't know about either one yet. I wasn't scared of the elephants either. They let us walk real close, keeping in their shadows, so it didn't seem likely they were going to do anything much to me. No, it was the people that scared me. See, I figured they'd be hungry. That was pretty much how it was, too. I came on 3 of them and started talking like I was one of them, hoping they'd be friends, that we could all go looking through the grass for something to eat, and water, too. It was a man and 2 women, and when they saw me and saw the shine of my knife, it wasn't as dark as this in there then, and their eyes had got used to it. They went right along. Not saying we were all together, but talking like it. Then 2 more came up, and I wasn't too sure, so I backed off a little. After that, the biggest man you ever saw came, and more with him. They hadn't hardly gotten there when they tried to get behind me, and I ran. 2 were after me, just like a couple of arrows, only we didn't have arrows then. Here I've got to stop and go back and tell you about the big man. His name was Kazi, only I never found it out until after I killed him. When I was talking to him, I told him what a nice place I thought he had here, and how I'd bring him 3 more, all women, from the city tomorrow. It was the sort of stuff I always said when I was trying to get away, only I could make a real good pitch for it, make it sound like these women were real, and they'd come if I said everything was cool. I didn't think it would go over with him, only it seemed like I ought to try it. Yeah, that's right. Mostly right, anyway. Only when I saw those guys slipping off, I knew it was time to go. What I didn't know was how fast 2 of them were. The first thing I knew, they were so close I could hear them sucking air. Then I tripped. It was lucky, I guess, because both of them fell over me, only I'd lost my knife when I fell. One stabbed the other, thinking he was me, and I hid in the grass. Pretty soon the 3rd one came, and they helped the stabbed man up and promised him they wouldn't eat him unless he died. I don't know if he believed them, but I didn't. I hunted around through the grass after that looking for my knife. It took me a long time, and I kept thinking that pretty soon it would be light again. Only it wasn't, and I finally found it. Just before that, I heard a lion roar. He was still roaring off and on when I found it. Sure I do. Hack drew it there for me. Lions have always been lucky for me. Sometimes I think maybe it's lions and me like it's elephants and spiders. You remember when there was this one lioness that was killing us? I said, all right, we gotta kill her, and I want 5 men brave enough to help me. I sort of hoped all the men would volunteer, you know. But I only got 4. The 5 of us went off anyway, and when we were alone, I told them, okay, we're the Lion Friends. You're special, all 4 of you. Stick with me, and nothing bad is going to happen to you, ever. We did the hand grip thing and swore, and off we went. Yeah, you're right, honey. I told you about running away from Kazi, right? And finding my knife in the grass, right? Well, I felt pretty good about things then, only I was still hungry, and it seemed like it would be light soon, and I wouldn't be the only one in sight. Night is worse than day out there in the grass country, only I didn't know that yet. I was sort of cussing my knife inside for being lost so long and making me waste all that time when I heard something moving through the grass. I stopped right where I was and listened, and after a while I sort of crouched down. For a long, long time, I didn't hear it again. And I did. It was big, I could tell that, and moving really, really slow. Only, it was so big, it couldn't help making some noise when it moved. No, not its feet. It was just pushing the grass to one side that I heard. The grass whispered every time it did that, and there wasn't any way to stop it. At first I thought it was probably an elephant. Only by that time, I had a pretty good idea of where it was, what direction, I mean. I knew it was close, too. I just didn't know how close. But when I looked in that direction, I couldn't see a thing. Even little elephants are really big, and the dome was getting light by then. I was pretty sure I'd be able to see an elephant, even a little one's quite a ways off. After a while, I got a good fix on how far it was, too, and it was close. Really, really close. So, I thought it was probably good to eat, and if it came close enough for me to see it, I'd kill it and have something to eat. The big round snout of it came first, and it was just light enough by then for me to see the teeth. Their lips don't cover their teeth right. I hope you don't ever see one so close you can notice that. I jumped, and it charged. It knocked me off my jump, so I fell in the grass, but I bounced up quick and ran before it figured out where I was. That's right. It was a river lizard. The big ones come up out of the water when it gets dark and hunt along the shore if they're real hungry. The little ones don't do it because they know the big ones will eat them if they catch them. They're a lot like people, those river lizards. The thing was, I was close to the river, and I hadn't even known it. It's not a good place to be any time, but when it's dark, it's the worst place in the boat. Well, honey, I wanted a drink of water almost as much as I wanted something to eat, but that river water looked dirty and stunk, so I just backtracked it instead. I'd like to say here how smart I was, but the truth was that the thing I was most afraid of was going in circles. If I did that, I'd find myself back with Kazi and those guys. Only I figured that if I followed the river, it would never circle back. What I hadn't figured on was that the water would clear up, but I sure was glad to see it. When I thought about it, I saw that the spiders must pump it out up there in the hills and filter it when it gets where it's going, and maybe even boil it or something. Anyway, I had a drink, and it was pretty good. After a while, when I'd walked quite a bit and was getting hot, I had another one that was even cooler and better than the first one. By that time the water was so clear, I could see there weren't any river lizards hanging around in it. There weren't any on the bank either. So I got in and had a nice swim, like I used to swim in the lake back home when it was summer and the weather got hot. That could be pretty dangerous back home, and probably it was dangerous where I was, too, only I didn't see any dogs or anything. Those dogs are worse than lions, and don't you forget it. If a lion decides to go for you, she'll come right at you. But, well, I said she because it's nearly always the girl lions that do it. Like the one that I was telling you about that me and my lion friends hunted. We found her too, and some younger females with her, and cubs, and one big black-maned male. He just stared at us, but I knew what he was saying. I always do, nearly, with lions. He said, I don't want any trouble, but if you start some, I'll finish it. So I told him we didn't want any either, but one of his girls had killed 3 of us, and that was the trouble. The other guys, my lion friends, looked at me like I was crazy, but I knew the big male had understood me. He had blinked, and I know what that means when a lion does it. The females were snarling a little, and those that had cubs were trying to get them out of the way. I went up to the one we were hunting then and told her she had to stop killing us, or we'd have to kill her. I said I knew it made her feel young again. I understood that, but it had to stop just the same. So what was it? Stop killing us, or die today? She stared at me, and then she nodded and turned away. That meant it was over. I relaxed, and so did the lions. My friends had their spears and shields up, though. I had to tell them it was over and we could relax and go home. After a while, one said I had talked to the lioness, only she hadn't never talked to me. I said yes, she did. She promised to stop killing people. That shut them up for a while. Then one of them said, how do we know she'll keep her promise? And I explained that she was bound to keep it. She was a lion. And she did, too. Fine, let's get back to that. I wasn't trying to get out, just trying to find something to eat. You know about the deer and goats, and the striped ones that are sort of like horses, and they're all good to eat, only I didn't see any then. But I don't think I could have gotten one if I had. What happened was that the hills got bigger, and there were cliffs, and after I'd walked a long, long way, I came to the end, the place where the river started. It ran out of a cliff there, and if you looked careful, you could see a door beside it. A great big door, big enough for a spider. It was painted to look like rock, and a good job, too. Only it wasn't really rock, it was metal, and the spider that had gone through it last hadn't closed it all the way. There was a little crack, like, that I could squeeze through. So I did, and when I had, I was in a tunnel, like underground, only it was in the boat. I knew there'd be spiders, and they'd get me if they could, so I went fast until it opened out, and when it opened out, it was a food place, with the boxes and things hung up where you couldn't get at them. You know how they do. It smelled good in there, so I cut open a few boxes. I think it was 3, but it was a long time ago, and I can't be sure. Could have been 4, or even 5. Finally, I found one that had food in it, the kind we call meal, because we pretty often make a meal of it. I was hungry, and I ate a lot, and then I was thirsty. I thought I'd run back along that tunnel and go out into the grass country and drink from the river. Only that time I noticed something I had been too scared to see before. You could turn off into a place where a lot of noise was and see the river getting born right there. Big pipes, you know, and water running out of them, and all running together until all the water ran out through a hole that I knew had to go out into the grass country. So I could get a drink right there, and I did. I slept and ate some more, and it took me a long time to find my way out of the boat, but I did that too. And when I did, I went back inside and got some really good food to take with me. Why? Well, honey, you'd know if you just think about it. I was all alone in there, but I had friends back in the city. You're always a lot safer if there's people around you know that know you. I had some friends, and there was this girl. I figured I'd bring them all in. So back I went, with the food wrapped up in a kind of paper the spiders have that you can eat. Everybody was gone. Irene, Edwards, all of them. I looked and looked, and about got myself killed, only I never did find them, or find out what had happened to them either. Then I found another girl, really young and about starved. I was hungry again myself by then, so I said, hey, look at all this good stuff I got here. You give me what I want, and I'll give you as much of this as you can eat. Naturally, she said I had to give her some food first, and that was when I surprised her. I said, sure, sit down. Here it is, only I get some too. So she did, and ate until I thought she'd bust, and didn't stop until everything was gone. Only I'd been eating too, and I was bigger. I didn't eat as much as she did, but I ate one hell of a lot, There's nothing like sharing with somebody who's about starved to make you eat everything in sight. So then she lay down and everything, and that decided me. I had about decided already, but that nailed it down. I said, "You stand up and come with me." I said you had to give me what I wanted, and what I want is for you to come along with me to a place I'm going to show you where you won't ever be hungry again. That last wasn't quite true. We've been hungry a time or three, only I thought it was true when I said it, so I wasn't lying. Sure, I took her back to the spider boat and brought her in with me. I showed her some food, and I told her she could stick with me or split. I couldn't watch her all the time, and I wasn't going to try. If she split, that was okay. I'd said she could. Only I knew my way around. She'd seen that a couple times on the way to the boat, and even if she did, because she'd said she did, too, a friend with a knife never hurts. She said she'd stick, so then I said, "Fine, I'm all for that. Now, if we stay here where the food is, pretty soon a spider is going to come along and see we've been eating it and start looking for us. Moving the big boxes and around things and all this stuff. Maybe he doesn't find us the first time, okay? But the next time he might bring somebody to help. We'd have to get out, or we're meat. So what I say is, I'm going where the water is. I know where there's plenty of water, good, clean, cool water. It's good for drinking and swimming, too. I don't think they come here a lot, and there's no way they could tell we were drinking their water because it's running downhill anyhow. So that's where I'm going. If you're really going to stick, just come along." She did, so I took her out to the grass country, down the river just far enough that we were out of sight of the door. Spiders walk quiet, but I had the notion that the door opening was bound to make a noise, and shutting a lot more. I wanted to be close enough to hear them both, but not so close that a spider would see us as soon as it stuck its eyes out. They got 8 eyes. I know you've never been close enough to count them, but I have. It's 8, just like the legs, only some little and some big. Maybe you saw this one coming, but I didn't. Somebody closed that door. We'd found a hole in the rocks that made us pretty safe. If anything wanted to get at us, there was only one way it could. We'd collect dry stuff, dead grass and bushes, and make a fire at the opening. Not a big one, a little one that didn't smoke. It gave us light to see anything trying to get in, and it was something anything that tried to get in had to dodge to do it. So we were pretty safe in there, only we didn't have a lot of food. We got some while the door was still open and piled it in back. That was good, but it didn't last. We tried to find something else, and did sometimes, but what we needed was another way to get back to where the meal was and the rest of it. We looked and looked, but we didn't have any luck with it. Getting in where the water came out would have been great, but it goes too fast. Finally, I told her there had been other people on the grass, lower down where things flattened out. They had come in the way the elephants did, and it was how I'd come in, too. Maybe that was still open, or maybe they'd found another way out. So the thing for us to do was find them, stay out of sight, and see what they were doing. She said no. She'd stay right where she was, and I could go scouting, like I said. There were long-legged bugs you could eat if you picked the legs off first and toasted the rest in the fire, and she'd catch them and eat them and maybe find something else. We argued about it for a couple of days, but pretty soon I saw it was a no-go. If I made her come when she didn't want to, she'd give us away sure, or else she'd split when my back was turned. Either one would be a lot worse than leaving her behind, so I said okay. Then she surprised me again. She made me promise that if something got her, or if she starved, I'd bury anything that was left and not eat it. I said, "Have you got a sickness or something?" She said no. She just didn't want anybody to eat her. "Have you got that one figured yet, honey?" "Well, don't feel so bad. It took me most of the first day, but I got it eventually. We were both hungry, and she was afraid I'd offer and eat her. Only, if I went away by myself, it'd have to be somebody else. I hadn't even been thinking about that, only about finding some way to trap the little deer or goats or whatever they were that were about the only animals we saw there. Maybe after a few more days, it would have been different, though. I don't know. If anything more happened the day I left, I don't remember what it was, but something pretty big happened the next day. I was up on a rock, and I saw a herd of striped horses running like crazy. There might have been 20 of them, but I couldn't see what was scaring them. Then one went down, and I did. It was a lion, and she got one, so she quit chasing the rest. I went there. You'd probably think it was a damn fool thing to do, but here's how I figured. She had the horse, and the hungrier she was, the more likely she'd eat that and not chase me. Besides, she couldn't possibly eat the whole thing. She was bound to leave some, and just a little piece of it would hold me for a day or so. Maybe I'd get killed, but it seemed like I was bound to starve if I didn't do something. And this was something. The problem was that I wasn't the only one. Some big birds had seen her kill the striped horse, too. Pretty soon, 6 or 8 were circling high up, waiting for a turn at the meat. They weren't the worst, not at all. A dog showed up, and pretty soon 2 more. They were thinking about the striped horse, sure, but they were thinking about me, too. I could see it in the way they looked at me, and the way they acted. There weren't nearly as many rocks there as I wanted. It was most dirt and grass. But I found a few, and every time I found one, I pegged it at one of those dogs. They didn't have the guts to rush me from in front, but they kept trying to get around behind. Pretty soon I found the thing to do was to get close to the lion and the dead horse, only keep my back to them. She didn't want to jump me. She was too busy eating. And she'd start getting nasty any time one of those dogs got close. Finally, I stunned one with a rock. It fell down, and when it did, I ran up and stabbed it in the neck. The other 2 tore into it, which didn't surprise me at all. Pretty soon the lion finished eating and started dragging her horse away. I followed her, not getting too close, and watching behind me a lot more than ahead. She dragged it down a rocky slope to a little place where there were slopes or little cliffs all around, and bushes a lot bigger than grass. There were weeds there way higher than my head, weeds that rattled together. You probably don't believe it, honey, and I don't blame you. But there were. They came in handy, too. When the lion got her horse there, she covered it up with bushes and grass. Some of it was dead stuff she raked together, and some was stuff she tore up herself, not using her paws, but biting the stems. When she finished, she went off into the rocks and drank. I couldn't see what she was doing, but I could hear her, and I felt like I'd found a new knife. I wanted water at least as much as I wanted food, and I knew that where I was now, the river water was bound to be bad. Probably I should have gone for the striped horse then, but I didn't. I waited for her to come up. She was as pretty a lion as I've ever seen, maybe as pretty as anybody ever has, darker than most of them, with the little black marks on her face you see sometimes. It was a good face, too. Good bone under the skin, and she moved sort of like one of those spotted cats. Her feet never made a sound, and it seemed like nothing she did took extra effort. Well, honey, I told her I just wanted one little piece off her horse, and I showed her how big I meant with my hands. I said I'd run off the dogs, which was kind of true, and they'd have taken it all. She agreed with that, so after that I knew I had a good chance, and I tried even harder. I said I only wanted a piece like I'd showed her, and I'd cut it off and not ruin any more while I was doing it. She could stay and watch if she wanted, only she wouldn't have to because I'd be just as honest with her gone. After I got my piece, I'd cover up her horse just like she had it, and add more cover I'd cut myself. She could stay and watch that too if she wanted. She said no. It was her kill, and I couldn't have any. I said, you could kill me if you wanted to. Both of us know that. You're stronger than I am, and you can run faster. So why don't you kill me? She said she didn't need to. She never killed more meat than she could eat. Killing too much meat just meant more dogs and more birds. I knew then that she hated the dogs, I could tell from the way she talked about them. So I said I'd kill the dog today. She'd seen it, so she had to agree with that. Isn't somebody who kills dogs better than the dogs? She said she didn't know, but I knew how she felt. So I said I wouldn't ask a reward for what I'd done, but if she gave me the meat I'd asked for, I'd kill another one for her. I'd been looking at the tall weeds, you see, and I'd had an idea. She stared at me for a long time after that, trying to decide if I was honest. Finally, I said I'd be her friend if I could, and I was starving. Wouldn't it make sense to help me? That did it. She let me cut myself a piece, and I did, no bigger than I told her I'd take. I ate about half of it then and there. No, I didn't cook it. Cooking would have made it easier to chew. That's the big advantage of cooking as far as I can see. But making a fire would have taken half a day. After that, I went down in the rocks, like she had, and found a little spring down there. It was good water, and I drank all I could hold. When I came back up, I put the grass and the bushes back that I had taken off, and cut some more and piled them on too. Sometimes she watched me, and sometimes she closed her eyes and laid down her head. Do you wonder why I'm telling you all these things, honey? It's not because I like reliving the old days. It's not to entertain you either. This history's yours, and you've got to know it and teach it to your kids. You think the kids are way far away. I hear their footsteps. Many feet, closer all the time. Yeah, I found the door the elephants had used. It wasn't hard. I'll get to that in a minute. First, I gotta tell you that while I piled up the brush, I heard a fight behind me. Turning quick, I saw a dog die in the jaws of a young lion. When it was dead, I nodded and thanked him and said it had been a good job. He licked the blood from his lips. Only birds eat dead dogs. Give me that meat, he said. I nodded again, saying he'd earned it, and I gave it to him. He'd never been able to kill a man. He told me as soon as he'd eaten it. You won't kill me either, I told him. Why should you want to? I'll be a friend. We'll have lots of kills. His eyes said he didn't believe me. There's something I gotta do first, I told him. It won't take long, and when I finish it, I'll show you a man twice as big as me and give him to you. His eyes got big, and I knew I had him. I cut down a tall weed and then lopped it. It was hard and hollow, and cutting it slantwise made a point. We found Kazi and his people after dark on the second day. They'd made a fire, and we saw it a long way across the level grass. They saw me and my lion and backed off, all but Kazi. I told the lion that was him. He should have jumped him then, but he hung back and Kazi went for his knife. I hit his wrist with my spear before I drove it in his belly because I was scared it wouldn't work. It worked great, and my lion jumped him. You take him, I told my lion. He's all yours. I'll eat somebody else. Only I didn't have to, and I knew it. They had little deer on the fire, and I got all I wanted. They didn't have the guts to come close until I told them they could. Well, honey, that's how I got to be king. And it's probably more than a little head like yours can remember. Oh, sure. We found the elephant door, like I said, and it wasn't hard. What I did was keep after this one young one, giving her a bad time. She wasn't big and didn't have the guts of a bull, so I'd hit her with rocks or stick a spear in her. Or shoot an arrow after we got those. Keep her miserable, you know. So pretty soon she went back to the door. Elephants aren't like people. They don't ever forget, and she wanted to go home. No, of course not. Once she'd showed us, we killed her and ate her. What did you think? After, we got it open, and that's how we got back in here. The grass country's a good place when the spiders get to putting out traps, though. Safer for you kids. Sure I did. Kazi'd had 2 wives, and I took them over. Only a river lizard got one by the leg and drowned her. It's how they do. The other one got to giving me a hard time, so we ate her. After that, I remembered your mom and went back for her. Now, I want you to remember all this stuff and think about it before you sleep. You're gonna have to teach your own kids how I got to be king and why you're queen, see? I know you think your kids are far away, but guys see your tits already. You pick a good one. He doesn't have to be big, but he's gotta be tough, and he's gotta be somebody who'll stick by you. If he isn't, I'll off him if I'm still around. If I'm not, you'll have to off him yourself. Quick. Now you lie down and think about all this before you go to sleep, honey. Out Beyond the Stars. For years and years now I have been accustomed to say that I knew Frederick Pohl. It is true only conventionally. Let me tell you a story. When I was very much younger, Frederick Pohl bought a story from me. It was my second sale, and it meant a lot to me. One waits and hopes and prays for the first sale, but when it comes, there is a suspicious look of tinsel and a faint odor. Could that be cardboard? The first sale may be a fluke. The world is full of people who sold a short story once. Is this for real? Am I a real writer? If so, why do I feel just the same? The second sale confirms and convinces. One knows then that one can do this marvelous thing. One can sit in one's basement, type away and have fun doing it, and send off the result to some magical address that will provide a little money and a little fame. Neat. Frederick Pohl, whom I knew even then was a famous science fiction writer, had given me my second sale. Have I said that? I may say it a third time. It made me feel wonderful, and I was deeply grateful. Soon I went to my first science fiction convention, a Worldcon in St. Louis. This was in the days when Worldcons drew fewer than 1,000 people. In the lobby of the con hotel I found a guy whose badge was festooned with ribbons and asked whether Frederick Pohl was at the con. Beaming, he assured me that he was. I explained that I had never seen Frederick Pohl. Could he describe him? You can see him for yourself. The beribboned guy pointed. That's him right over there. It was a group of 4 or 5 men chatting. When they broke up, I introduced myself and said, Mr. Pohl, you bought a story from me, and selling it to you gave me the confidence I needed to keep writing. I want to thank you. I owe you much more than I can ever repay. He smiled. You don't owe me a damned thing, Gene. You sent me a good story and I bought it. That's my job. If I'd sent you a bad one, I would have rejected it. I'm the one who owes you. I get a lot of stories, and very few of them are good enough to publish. Whenever somebody sends me a good, publishable story, he's doing me a big, big favor. I left thinking, wow, that Frederick Pohl is a great human being. The next day I found out I had been talking to Lester Del Rey. So now I know Frederick Pohl. I could never mistake him for Lester Del Rey again. For one thing, Fred is taller. For another, his face is not as hairy. Now I'm acquainted with this great human being, who now lives only 5 or 6 miles from my front door. But I do not know him. I mean, really know him. It may be that Betty does, but if she does, she's the entire membership of a set of 1. Things I do know about Fred Pohl. He is a high school dropout. He's the best educated dropout in America, maybe the world. He was in the Army in World War II. He was a sergeant. He hated the Army. He married a 2nd lieutenant. There may be a connection here to the fact above. He has attended every Worldcon beginning 2 years before they did. He knows everybody in science fiction. He knows them because they are proud to know him. He has been an agent and an editor, which is what he was when he bought my story. He has been a leading science fiction writer ever since the publication of The Space Merchants in 1952. In 1952, I went from college student to dropout to soldier. Fantasy makes him break out in hives and swear. He destroyed the science fiction club I joined when we moved into the area by marrying our club's president, Elizabeth Ann Hull. They are national treasures. Read that list carefully, and you will find that I do not really know Fred Pohl at all. I don't know what makes him write so well, and I don't know what lets him keep writing whole decades beyond the age at which most writers fall silent. I don't know what makes him rove the world so tirelessly, writing all the time, and going to places too remote for the average stamp collection. I don't know what it is that permits him to send his mind out beyond the stars, not once, but over and over again. And I don't know why he tolerates me, but I'm certainly glad he does. Gene Wolfe.